We bring ancient wisdom to life through modern technology, creating a bridge between the lessons of the past and the challenges of tomorrow. Join our unique exploration of what it means to be human. Subscribe now and help us build a bridge to the future. The Florida sun had just begun to burn through the morning haze when my son-in-law called to remind me that the rent was due. Not my rent, his. I remember standing at the kitchen window, watching a pelican glide over the water in the distance, thinking how strange it was that a man who had borrowed $43,000 from me over 2 years still managed to speak to me like I was his personal secretary. His name was Daniel, and for a long time, I told myself he was just stressed, just busy, just adjusting to married life. I was wrong. My name is Robert. I am 69 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer in Tampa, Florida, and I raised my daughter Caroline, mostly on my own after her mother. My wife Patricia passed away from cancer 12 years ago. Caroline was 22 when we lost Patricia. She handled it better than I did. Honestly, she was strong in the way her mother was strong quietly, without making a show of it. When Caroline met Daniel at a work conference 4 years ago, I tried to see what she saw in him. He was charming. No question about that. He had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. He talked about his plans the way young men do, with total confidence and no real evidence. He was going to open his own landscaping business. He had the contacts. He said. He had the vision. He just needed a little help getting started. I gave him that help. The first time I wrote a check for Daniel, it was $20,000. A business loan, we called it. He had drawn up something on his computer that looked almost like a contract payment terms. An interest rate of 0% because he was family. A repayment schedule, starting 18 months later. I signed it. He signed it. Caroline hugged me and said I was the best father in the world. That was 2 years ago. Not one payment had ever come back to me. I told myself it was fine. Businesses take time. I had savings. I was comfortable. Patricia had left a modest life insurance policy, and I had my pension and my retirement account. I was not a rich man, but I was not struggling either, and Caroline was happy. That mattered to me more than the money. But then the requests kept coming. 6 months after the business loan, Daniel called to say he needed help with the down payment on their house. Just a bridge loan, he said. Temporary. He would have it back to me by summer. That was $9,000. Summer came and went. Then there were the medical bills from when Daniel threw out his back. Then the new truck, because the old one had transmission problems, and he needed a reliable vehicle for the business. Then the equipment rental that he said was going to triple his revenue once the contract came through. I kept a small notebook in my desk drawer where I wrote down every amount, not because I expected to collect it like a debt collector. I wrote it down because I needed to see it clearly. Because there is a version of generosity that is healthy, and there is a version that is something else entirely. I was trying to figure out which one I was living in. The total, by the time that Tuesday phone call came, was $43,200. He called me just after 8 in the morning. I had just made coffee. I was planning to drive out to Clearwater that day to visit an old colleague who had been having some health trouble. It was supposed to be a simple, good day. Hey, Robert, Daniel said. Not Dad. Never Dad. Always Robert. Spoken the way you say the name of someone whose primary function is financial. Just checking in on that check we talked about. The equipment lease renewal is coming up this week, and I need to get ahead of it. We had not talked about any check. I had no memory of this conversation. I don't think we discussed that. I said. There was a pause. A small, impatient pause that I had heard many times before. It was the pause that came right before he decided to try a different angle. I mentioned it at dinner last month. He said, You said you'd think about it. I think about a lot of things. I said, That doesn't mean I agreed to anything. Another pause. Longer this time. It's just 4,000. Robert, it's not a big deal. I looked out at the water. The pelican was gone. I'll call you back, I said. I sat with my coffee for a long time after I hung up. I thought about the notebook in my desk drawer. I thought about the way he had said just 4,000. As if the number were small. As if my money were a resource so abundant that amounts with 4 digits attached to them barely qualified as real money. I thought about Caroline, and whether she knew exactly how much had passed between her husband and me. I called her that afternoon. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding slightly rushed. She was at work, she said. But she had a minute. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about the loan situation, I said. I kept my voice neutral. I had no desire to start a fight. I just wanted clarity. Dad, she said, and I heard something careful in her voice. Something rehearsed. Daniel and I have talked about this. We know we owe you money. We're going to pay it back. We just need a little more time. I understand that, I said, but he called this morning about another 4,000. Caroline, I need you to know that I've lent you both a lot of money. More than you might realize. How much, she asked. $43,000. The silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. That can't be right. She finally said, I have every amount written down. I said, every date, every reason he gave me. She was quiet again. Then, Dad, I have to go. I'll call you tonight. She did not call me that night. 3 days passed. Then Daniel called again. Caroline told me you two talked. He said. His voice was different now. The charm was still there. But underneath it was something harder. I think there might be some misunderstanding about the arrangement. What misunderstanding, I asked. You always said this was because we were family. You never made it feel like a loan. Like something with a deadline. I set down the book I had been reading. I have a contract, I said quietly. With your signature on it? For 20,000. He said, the rest was just, you offered. Robert, nobody forced you. I want you to understand something about that moment. I am not a man who raises his voice. I was not raised that way. And I did not raise my daughter that way either. But there is a kind of statement that does something to you on the inside. Something that starts in your chest and moves slowly outward until it reaches the edges of everything. He was not entirely wrong that I had offered. I had, but the way he said it, nobody forced you, as if generosity freely given cannot also be taken advantage of. As if the spirit of an act doesn't matter. Only the paperwork. I'll be in touch. I said, and I hung up. That evening, I drove to the marina near my house. I used to bring Caroline there when she was small. We would get fish tacos from the little stand near the water and watch the boats come in. Patricia would have loved that spot. She had always wanted to live somewhere near water. I had promised her we would retire somewhere with a view of the ocean, and I had kept that promise even though by the time I made it to Florida, I was keeping it alone. I sat on a bench near the dock and I thought very clearly about what I was going to do. I thought about my neighbor, a woman named Margaret Okafor, who ran a small accounting practice out of her home 2 doors down from me. We had coffee together every Saturday morning, and she had been listening to me talk about Daniel for almost 2 years. She had told me, politely but directly, about 4 months ago, that I needed to stop lending money to people who did not respect me. I had told her she was probably right. Then I had lent Daniel money 2 more times after that. The next morning I called Margaret. I told her everything, the full 43,000. The contract for the original 20. The informal amounts after that. The phone calls. The way Daniel had said, nobody forced you. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. And then she said, Robert, do you still have that original contract? Yes. I said, scan it and send it to me today. She said, and write down everything else. Dates, amounts, what he said the money was for. Everything you have in that notebook. I want to see the full picture before you do anything else. I did exactly that. What Margaret found, when she looked at everything together, was not complicated. The original 20,000 was documented and legally recoverable. The remaining amounts, while not formally contracted, could be argued as loans under Florida law given the pattern of communication and the fact that Daniel had, in several text messages, used the word repay and pay you back and owe you. She had a friend who was a civil attorney. She made a call. The attorney's name was James Whitfield. He was practical, efficient, and seemed almost cheerful about the whole thing in the way that people are cheerful when they are very good at what they do. He told me that the case was not airtight for the full amount, but was strong for the documented portions and reasonable for the rest. He said I should stop all financial support immediately. No more loans. No more checks. No more help of any kind until the matter was resolved. What about my daughter? I asked. That's a conversation you need to have with her. He said, but Robert, I want to be honest with you. If she doesn't know what's been happening with this money, and it sounds like she may not have known the full picture, then that conversation might go better than you expect. I thought about that. I also thought about something else. About a week before my conversation with Margaret, I had let Daniel borrow my old iPad. He had said his tablet was broken, and he needed something to check his business emails while he was at a job site. He had brought it back the next day, and when I went to clear my recent apps that evening, I found that he had not fully closed out of his messages. Not his email. His messages. I want to be clear. I did not go looking. I was trying to close the app, but the thread was there on the screen before I understood what I was looking at. And what I saw in those 30 seconds before I closed it stopped me completely. It was a group thread. The name of the group was something casual. 3 or 4 names. Clearly people Daniel knew. And in that thread, over the course of several exchanges, Daniel had discussed me in a way that I will not reproduce word for word here. But the meaning was plain. I was referred to as the old man. There were comments about how easy it was to get money from me. There was a message where Daniel wrote that I was lonely since my wife died, and that lonely old men were the easiest kind to manage. Someone in the thread had responded with a laughing emoji. Daniel had responded with another one. I had closed the iPad and put it in my closet. I had not known what to do with what I had seen. Some things take time to absorb. Some things you have to sit with before you can respond to them clearly. I had been sitting with this one for a week. And now, with Margaret and James Whitfield in my corner, I knew what I was going to do. I called Caroline. This time I asked her to come to my house. I told her it was important, and that I needed her to see something in person. To her credit, she came that same evening. She arrived at 6, wearing the blue sweater Patricia had given her the Christmas before she passed. And for a moment when I saw her standing in my doorway, I felt the weight of everything I was about to say. We sat at the kitchen table. I made tea, and then I showed her the notebook, and the contract, and the text that James Whitfield had already reviewed. I showed her the amount, all $43,200, laid out line by line with dates attached. She did not say anything for a very long time. Then I opened the iPad. I had taken screenshots of the thread before I closed it that night. Even though I had not been sure at the time why I was doing it, I had operated on instinct. I showed her the screenshots. Caroline read them the way you read something that you want to misunderstand but cannot. Slowly, and then very still, and then in a way that was not reading anymore but something closer to absorbing a physical impact. When she looked up at me, her eyes were bright. "Dad," she said. "I know." I said, "I didn't know it was this much." "I know that too." I said, "I'm not angry at you. He told me you liked helping. He said you always offered first. He said it made you feel useful." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. I believed him. "I should have asked you directly. I should have, Caroline." I said, "You don't have to do that right now." She nodded. She folded her hands around her mug of tea. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to file a civil claim for the documented amount," I said. "My attorney thinks we have a reasonable case. I'm not doing it out of anger. I'm doing it because $43,000 is not a number I should simply absorb to keep the peace." She nodded again. "And I want you to know," I said, "that whatever happens with you and Daniel is between you and Daniel. That is not my business. But I will not be sending any more money, not to him, not for the business, not for any reason that goes through him. If you ever need something directly, as you call me, and we talk about it directly. That is the only arrangement I'm willing to have going forward." Caroline looked at me for a long moment. "When did you get this clear about things?" she asked. "About a week ago," I said. "I sat on a bench at the marina, and I thought about your mother. And I thought about the fact that she would have told me to do this 18 months ago. Caroline smiled. A real smile. Small and sad and genuine. "She would have," she said. I filed the civil claim the following week. Daniel was served at his business address. The call I received from him that evening was not pleasant. He was loud and accusatory, and he used the word betrayal in a way that I found remarkable coming from him, but I had turned on the recording function on my phone before I answered. On James Whitfield's advice. And I let him speak. I did not argue. I said very little. When he finished, I said, "I'll see you in court." And I ended the call. The case was not settled overnight. These things rarely are, whatever dramatic stories might suggest. There were several months of back and forth, two of paperwork and negotiations, and a mediation session in which Daniel sat across a conference table from me and could not quite manage to make eye contact. His attorney argued that the undocumented amounts were gifts. James argued that the pattern of correspondence clearly demonstrated loan intent. In the end, we reached a settlement for $31,000 less than the full amount. But more than nothing, and more importantly, more than Daniel had ever intended to give me. I put the money into a travel fund. This might seem like a strange detail, but it matters to me. Patricia had a list. Not a formal list. Not written down anywhere. Official. Just a list she kept in her head and talked about whenever we had a quiet evening together. Places she wanted to go. Things she wanted to see. The Oregon coast. The Great Smoky Mountains in October. New Orleans for the food. Quebec City in winter, because she had read about it in a novel once and never forgotten the description of the lights on the old buildings in the snow. I had not taken a single trip in the 12 years since she died. I booked Oregon first. I went alone, which is a different thing than going lonely. I drove down the coast highway with the windows open and the ocean on my left, and I thought about Patricia and about Caroline and about the strange long road that had brought me to this particular moment on this particular stretch of road. I stayed in a small inn in a town called Cannon Beach. I ate very good clam chowder. I watched the sun go down over the water, and I felt, for the first time in longer than I could easily name, that I was living my life rather than funding someone else's inting. Caroline called me while I was in Oregon. We had been talking more regularly since everything happened. She and Daniel had separated 2 months after the lawsuit was filed. She said the separation was not entirely about the money or the group thread, that there were other things, quieter things, that had been accumulating for longer than she wanted to admit. She was seeing a therapist. She sounded clearer than she had in years. "Are you okay?" "Dad," she asked. "I'm standing on a beach in Oregon." I said, "I'm doing fine." She laughed. It sounded like her mother's laugh. That particular warm catch in it. "Mom would have loved it there," she said. "I know." I said, "I'm doing it for both of us." There is something I want to say to anyone listening to this who is in the position I was in 2 years ago, who has been giving and giving to people who have learned to receive without any corresponding sense of obligation or gratitude, who has told themselves that it is fine, that family means sacrifice, that the discomfort of being taken for granted is just the price of keeping the peace. The peace is not worth what you are paying for it. You are allowed to want something back for what you give. Not everything. Not a transaction for every kindness. But basic respect, basic honesty. The basic acknowledgement that you are a person with value who deserves to be treated as such. Not a resource to be accessed when convenient and ignored when you are no longer useful. I spent 31 years building things that were meant to last, structures designed to hold weight, to withstand pressure, to remain standing when conditions got difficult. I know something about what it takes to build something durable, and I know that you cannot build anything that lasts on a foundation where one side bears all the weight. You have more strength than you have been allowed to use. You have more options than the people taking advantage of you want you to believe. And you deserve more, far more than the role they have quietly assigned to you. I am going to Quebec City in December. I have the hotel booked. I want to see the lights on the old buildings in the snow. Patricia would have loved it. And so, I think, will I